All right, we're going to go over kind of briefly, more or less, about, and hang with me here because this is really interesting, about how if you want to prevent hamstring problems or treat a hamstring problem, you need to stabilize your pelvis. So what exactly does that mean? Well, let's first start out with the pelvis. Your pelvis is here, okay, it's a little skeleton, and there's a side view of the pelvis. Your pelvis rotates. It rotates forwards, maybe do a few other things, but basically here's it rotates forwards and backwards, okay? So what does this have to do with your hamstrings? The answer lies in the fact that your hamstring muscle actually attaches to your bony pelvis. So let's take a look. So this area here, the hamstrings, this is your hamstrings, and it goes right to your pelvis, okay? Notice that the top ends of the hamstring muscle attach themselves to the pelvis and the bottom ends to the various points of your leg bones. Connecting in this manner, the hamstring muscle can do two main things: bend your knee, which is knee flexion, as well as help you bring your knee behind your body, hip extension. As the picture shows, it's not just one big massive muscle, it's actually made up of several distinct parts. And it has all these different names here, which I won't go into. You can look that up. And now that you know what a lot of people don't, that what is commonly called the hamstring muscle is really a group of 4 individual muscles. So, putting this all together from the last few pages, you can begin to see what the title of the chapter, Stabilize Your Pelvis, has to do with bulletproofing your hamstrings. Since the hamstring attaches to the pelvis and the pelvis moves, it's very important to make sure that the motion of the pelvis, that you have good control of the pelvis, because excessive or uncontrolled motion of the pelvis could affect the well-being and functioning of your hamstring muscles. On the next page is an example of demonstrating how movement of the pelvis directly affects the hamstrings. So standing still, your pelvis is in a middle or neutral position, but when you bend over, the pelvis now rotates forward, which stretches the hamstrings and makes it longer. So you can see there and there. So this is how the motion of your pelvis, which moves around as you do, can directly affect your hamstring muscles. The main point, having good control of your pelvis can definitely help bulletproof the hamstrings that attach to it. So how do you control the pelvis? Well, you simply by strengthening the muscles that attach to the pelvis. Some people might call them core muscles, but there are a lot of people that argue what actually makes up the core, by the way, if you read the research. Let's just call them the trunk muscles. Here's a basic picture of where the trunk muscles are in relation to the pelvis. Okay, so you can see how they attach to the pelvis. So when all is said and done, it breakdowns like this. Your pelvis moves, your hamstring muscles connected to your pelvis. Therefore, uncontrolled or excessive motion of your pelvis could affect the functioning of your hamstring muscles. Get better pelvic control by strengthening the trunk muscles, and you'll bulletproof your hamstring. All right, what about some studies say about this? Okay, research took 30 people with tight hamstrings and randomized them to one of the 2 groups. Here we go again. Randomized controlled trial, highest form of proof in medicine that the treatment's actually effective. One group did trunk stabilization exercises. The control group did nothing. Very good study. Had a control group that did absolutely nothing. Both groups had the flexibility of their hamstring muscles measured before and after a 4-week study period. At the end of the study, the group that did the trunk stabilization exercise actually increased the flexibility of their hamstring muscles, while the control group lost range. Perhaps the most interesting thing is that the hamstring muscles become more flexible not by doing stretching exercises, but by doing trunk stabilization exercises. One can't say for sure, but it could be that the hamstring muscles get stiff trying to compensate for a lack of pelvic stability caused from weak trunk muscles. I definitely would like to see more research in this area. Now, it's also been shown in randomized controlled trials to treat hamstring injuries as well. So here we go, 24 athletes with acute hamstring strain were randomized to one of 2 groups. The first group did icing, stretching, and hamstring strengthening. Second group did icing and agility and trunk stabilization exercise. At the end of the study, the average time required to return to sports was 37 days in the first group and 22 in the trunk stabilization group. Apparently, doing trunk stabilization exercises can help athletes with injured hamstring get back into action sooner. Okay? And then it goes into the stabilization exercises. So that's why it's very important to get control over your pelvis and stabilize it. That will actually go a long way in treating and preventing hamstring problems. So there you go. Bulletproof Your Hamstrings by Jim Johnson, PT. Great reference.